Imagine the possibility that the darkest warnings about the fate of humanity are already beginning to materialize. Padre Pio, a man whose spiritual legacy is renowned for his miracles and strong connection to the divine, left us a message that resonates more strongly than ever today. During his final years, he received revelations about an uncertain future. But what mysteries do these visions hide? And why might the year 2025 mark a turning point in our history? He lived with a physical and spiritual burden that brought him close to the suffering of Christ. And this was only part of what distinguished him. His stigmata, visible for decades, were a reflection of pain, but behind this torment was something more. If you enjoy content that helps you grow spiritually, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join our community for more inspiration. Let's get started. Through intense prayer and mystical experiences, he began to perceive evil in a way that few others could understand. He saw it not only as a personal temptation, but as a force that was slowly taking over the structures that governed human life. What is truly alarming about his visions is how they pointed to a time of spiritual chaos that was not limited to individual souls. Could it be that these dark forces are already at work in our own day? Today, the world seems to be mired in conflict and a loss of values that once united society. For those who follow the words of Padre Pio, it is impossible not to make a connection between what he predicted and the scenario we face today. He warned of an impending battle, but he was not talking about conventional wars. For him, what was crucial was the struggle within each human being, a battle to keep the faith and resist the evil influences that try to pull us away from the divine purpose. According to his revelations, the year 2025 would mark the climax of this spiritual confrontation. Those who were unprepared would risk being lost in the midst of the turmoil, but he also affirmed that there was a way to resist. Unwavering faith and conscious sacrifice were the keys to overcoming the difficult times ahead. He, during the last moments of his life, seemed to dwell between two worlds. Those around him described his presence as something beyond the earthly, as if he sensed something invisible to others. In the convent where he had spent his final years, the atmosphere became unusually dense, as if an air of solemnity and mystery pervaded every corner. The sensation was not only physical, but spiritual, as if an imminent presence was about to manifest itself. His Capuchin brothers felt the weight of this atmosphere, and although they continued with their daily tasks, it was impossible to ignore that something transcendental was about to happen. He, aware that his time on earth was coming to an end, devoted every minute to prayer. His devotion had not diminished. On the contrary, it seemed to have reached its peak. It is at such moments, when the everyday is shrouded in a cloak of spiritual silence, that we most need a guide to help us understand what is to come. Padre Pio showed us that even in the frailty of the body, the strength of the spirit can reach unexpected levels. If you have ever felt that something greater surrounds you and are looking for that peace that only faith can offer, now is the time to delve into his legacy. This is exactly what The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions offers, a path to clarity and peace through his revelations. This ebook delves into his prophecies and offers a glimpse of what lies ahead. It is available for free in the anchored commentary. Grab it now, before editions run out. Despite the pains that beset him, he remained steadfast in his purpose to remain a spiritual guide to those who came to him. Confessions became his ultimate mission, and many who sought his help found themselves in awe of his ability to reveal secrets of their souls that only they knew. As his health deteriorated, an unexpected request came from his lips. He asked that an image of Saint Joseph be placed in his room right next to his bed. He spent long periods of time in silence in front of that image, as if he were having an internal dialogue with the saint. The Capuchins who cared for him watched him with a mixture of respect and awe, knowing that something more complex was going on in that space of recollection. Why did Padre Pio, a man who had dedicated his entire life to the service of God, seem to be so focused on St. Joseph in his last days? The answer could lie in the visions he himself had described. He always had a special connection to the supernatural, and in those final moments it is likely that he was seeking the saint's intercession for a quiet death, a peaceful transition to an encounter with God. However, many of those around him could not help but sense that there was something more. The silent conversations he held in front of the image seemed to carry a hidden message, a warning to those who still had time in this world. Whenever his Capuchin brothers entered the room, they sensed the serenity in his eyes, but also a certain urgency. It was as if he knew that the end was near, but that his departure would bring with it something more than his physical death, a sign for the future. In his latter days, he demonstrated an important bond with St. Joseph that went beyond mere devotion. Those around him could sense that every prayer was more than a plea for a peaceful death. It seemed like a message to those watching him. The atmosphere around him had become almost mystical, and the friars accompanying him began to sense that something extraordinary was happening. Silently, he offered his last energies to spiritual service, still with the conviction that his mission was not over. Even though his face was calm as he gazed at the picture of St. Joseph, it was clear that he was experiencing greater issues. Perhaps he felt that his life was about to end, but he also understood that his legacy was not limited only to what he had done in life. Don't forget that the e-book with his revelations is still available for those seeking inner peace, but there are few units left. It was as if, through each prayer, she sought to intercede for those who would still face difficult times, a harbinger for those who would remain after her departure. In the weeks leading up to his death, the convent corridors were filled with an eerie calm. Some of the younger Capuchins commented among themselves about the change in atmosphere, something they could not explain in words. A silence enveloped everything, and although the daily routines continued, the feeling that something important was coming was palpable. He continued in his usual routine of prayer, but those who observed him closely noticed that there was a greater intensity in every gesture, in every word uttered in a low voice. The day he requested the image of St. Joseph, he did so with a firmness that surprised the brothers who were assisting him. Although his body was weakened, his voice did not falter as he asked for it to be placed right next to his bed. Each day, he spent long minutes staring at the image, almost as if waiting for a sign, a response. The brothers watched him from the doorway, respecting his space, but they could not help but wonder what he was seeing or feeling in those moments of contemplation. They knew they were witnessing something unique, but they did not understand the magnitude of what was happening. The relationship between Padre Pio and St. Joseph grew stronger in those final moments, as if the saint was their guide to the afterlife. The brothers who were closest to him recounted years later that his connection with St. Joseph was not only a search for peace in his death, but a spiritual preparation for those who would come after him. He seemed to convey, through his devotion, that it was necessary to be prepared for the dark times he had envisioned. He, in the midst of his frailty, maintained an unwavering spiritual strength. He, after his departure, left a mystery that resonated with all those who witnessed his last moments. The disappearance of the Chagas that had been part of his life for 50 years was seen not only as a miracle, but as a message that continues to inspire thousands today. The man who had endured so much pain, physically and spiritually, now lay at peace, his body restored in a way that no one could explain. What was the significance of this? Every aspect of him was powerful and meaningful, as those who knew him well understood. The Capuchin friars who watched over his body in those early days noticed something more than the absence of wounds. A floral fragrance pervaded the room, a sign that many interpreted as the presence of the divine. It was not the first time those close to Padre Pio had smelled this scent during his lifetime, but in death this perfume seemed more potent, as if it were a palpable reminder of his heavenly connection. Those who came to say goodbye found comfort in this last mystery, interpreting that, just as his wounds had healed, his spirit continued to heal those who called upon him. As news of his death spread, crowds began to arrive at San Giovanni Rotondo. Mexico was no exception, as his devotion to him had grown exponentially during the last years of his life. As you immerse yourself in Padre Pio's legacy and his tireless devotion, take the opportunity to discover more about how to strengthen your own faith. Download your ebook before the last units are sold out. Pilgrims from around the world flocked to his tomb, many hoping for miracles, others simply to pay homage to a man whose life had been a beacon of light in dark times. The helicopters that flew overhead, dropping flowers on the crowd during his funeral, reflected the magnitude of the devotion he inspired. Inside the church, solemnity reigned as his body, exposed for public view, revealed his smooth skin, devoid of the scars that had once witnessed his pain. It was as if God, in his infinite mercy, had decided to free him from the suffering he had endured for so many years. But for many, this bodily restoration was not only a sign of his liberation, but a confirmation of his holiness. His mission, though completed on earth, seemed to take on a new life from heaven. He had prophesied on several occasions that his work would not end with his death, and his followers soon began to experience what he had promised. Miracles began to multiply, and his tomb became a sacred place to which people from far and wide flocked for help. He, after his death, remained a key figure in the lives of his followers. Many claimed to feel his presence, especially in times of pain or uncertainty, as if his spirit continued to guide those in need. This phenomenon was not isolated, for over the years, numerous testimonies emerged from people who experienced what they described as a direct consolation from him. Some claimed to have perceived his presence in the form of a sense of peace. Others spoke of a floral aroma similar to that which filled the room after his death, as if he continued to answer the prayers of his faithful. These experiences not only strengthened the devotion of his followers, but confirmed the promise he had made in life. He would help more from heaven than on earth. For those who invoked him in times of need, this certainty was an inexhaustible source of hope. Mexico, in particular, became one of the countries where the figure of Padre Pio resonated with special intensity. Religious communities began to honor him as a protector, a figure who understood human suffering and offered divine consolation. Over time, his influence extended beyond healings and favors granted. His teachings, which revolved around the importance of prayer and sacrifice, became a spiritual legacy for those seeking a life closer to God. The prayer groups and churches in Mexico that venerated him firmly believed in his ability to intercede, even in the most desperate situations. In fact, several stories of healings and miracles began to emerge in the country, increasing the faith of those who turned to his image for help. His beatification in 1999, followed by his canonization in 2002, was seen as confirmation of what millions of the faithful already believed. His life had been a witness to holiness. This canonization was a key moment, not only because it officially recognized the miracles attributed to his intercession, but also because it consolidated his place in the heart of the Church and his followers. Reflecting on his prayer life is a reminder of the importance of spiritual strength. If you are looking to nurture your own spirit, don't forget to download the ebook. There are very few copies left. Since then, his influence has only grown, especially in Mexico, where many consider him an ally in the fight against the ills afflicting society. Through his visions and teachings, he had warned of times of trial for humanity. He was not referring only to material crises, but to a much more serious spiritual crisis. In letters and conversations with those around him, he shared fragments of these visions, in which he saw how evil would infiltrate institutions, corrupting the spiritual values that should guide society. According to him, the temptations of power and selfishness would divide people, leading them away from the right path. Those warnings did not go unnoticed by those who venerated him, and his followers in Mexico saw in his words a guide to face the challenges the country was going through. His visions not only warned of the dangers of a society disconnected from its spiritual principles, but also offered a clear solution. Constant prayer and unwavering faith would be the tools to resist. Padre Pio, as he neared the end of his life, never ceased to insist on the importance of spiritual preparation for difficult times. His visions of a turbulent future for humanity were not simply vague warnings, but an urgent call for people to return to faith, looking to God for the guidance needed to overcome the trials to come. His legacy continues to resonate around the world, especially in Mexico, where his figure is revered as a symbol of hope in times of uncertainty. With his life marked by sacrifice and suffering, he showed that difficulties should not be feared, but faced with courage. He knew that evil not only operated in a visible way, but was often hidden in everyday life, in the decisions we make every day. His message, then, was clear. Humanity had to refocus on the essentials, on prayer, compassion, and justice. In Mexico today, many of his followers feel that his warnings are more relevant than ever. The spiritual crisis he envisioned seems to be manifesting itself, with society struggling to maintain its values in the face of growing social and political tensions. On several occasions, he warned that temptation and greed would be the instruments that evil would use to divide communities and weaken the faith. His followers in Mexico see these signs in his surroundings and find in him a source of strength to resist. In one of his most striking visions, Padre Pio spoke of a spiritual test to come for humanity, where true faith would be put to the test. This message, far from being alarmist, was an invitation to prepare, to strengthen the spirit and not be carried away by worldly distractions. In this sense, the saint urged us not to wait for great signs, but to pay attention to small decisions, gestures of goodness, and opportunities to serve others. He had every confidence that those who remained firm in their faith would be able to overcome the difficulties he envisioned. For him, the key was constant prayer, personal sacrifice, and a real connection with God. This spiritual preparation, he said, would not only protect us from temptations, but would also bring us peace in the midst of chaos. If this message makes you reflect and you feel it connects with you, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Also, if you really want to support our work and help us continue to create valuable content, consider giving us a super thanks. Join this amazing community and don't miss any news. In his last days, surrounded by this awareness of the suffering to come, Padre Pio never stopped offering his prayers for those around him, for Mexico, and for the world. He knew that the most important battle was not physical, but spiritual, and that the fate of humanity depended on his ability to remain faithful to the principles of good.